The August sun beat down mercilessly on the parking lot of Riverside Park as I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had turned white. Through the windshield, I could see the familiar chaos of our annual family reunion unfolding under the pavilion, tables being arranged, coolers being hauled from car trunks, and children already running wild between the picnic benches. But what made my blood boil wasn't the usual pre-reunion scramble. It was the sight of my daughter-in-law, Jessica, positioned right at the entrance like some sort of self-appointed hostess, greeting every single family member as they arrived. My family members, my reunion, the gathering I had organized for the past 15 years without fail. I watched as my sister Margaret approached the pavilion with her famous potato salad, and there was Jessica, arms outstretched, pulling her into an enthusiastic hug as if they were long-lost friends. Margaret, bless her heart, looked genuinely delighted by the warm reception. Then came my brother Robert with his wife Linda, and again, Jessica was right there with her megawatt smile, taking their casserole dish and ushering them to what I noticed was not the seating arrangement I had carefully planned months in advance. My son David emerged from behind one of the support pillars, carrying folding chairs, and I felt my heart clench as I watched him beam at his wife with obvious pride. They'd been married for 3 years now, and while I'd really tried, to welcome Jessica into our family, she had this way of taking over. It started small, suggesting improvements to my Thanksgiving menu, reorganizing my kitchen when she visited, offering unsolicited advice about everything from my garden to my choice of church. But this was too far. The final straw came when I saw Jessica directing my own mother, 83-year-old Grandma Rose, to a chair that wasn't even in the shade. Grandma Rose, who had attended every single one of these reunions since I started organizing them, who always sat in the same spot under the big oak tree where she could see everyone and everything. Jessica was completely upending the natural order of things, and nobody seemed to notice or care. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard, 11:47 a.m. The reunion officially started at noon, and I had planned to arrive early to make sure everything was perfect, just as I always did. Instead, I was sitting in my car like a stranger at my own family's gathering, watching my daughter-in-law play hostess with my relatives. Taking a deep breath, I finally opened the car door and stepped into the sweltering heat. I had spent 3 days preparing for this reunion, making my famous 3-layer chocolate cake, organizing games for the kids, printing name tags for the newer family members, and creating a detailed schedule of activities. I wasn't about to let Jessica's presumptuous behavior ruin what should be a perfect day. As I walked toward the pavilion, balancing my cake carrier and the box of decorations I'd brought, I noticed that Jessica had somehow managed to completely rearrange the gift table where we always displayed family photos and memorabilia. The carefully curated collection of vintage family pictures I'd spent hours organizing was now scattered haphazardly, mixed in with what appeared to be a slideshow presentation running on someone's laptop. "Oh, Mom," David called out when he spotted me, jogging over with that easy smile that reminded me so much of his father. "There you are. Jessica was wondering where you were. She's been doing such an amazing job getting everyone settled. She's been wondering where I was. At my own family reunion, the audacity of it made my teeth ache from clenching my jaw so hard." "I can see that," I managed to say, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "She certainly has taken charge." David, oblivious to the tension in my voice, just nodded enthusiastically. "Isn't she great? She even made this whole digital presentation with old family photos she scanned from your albums. Everyone's been asking where she got them all." My albums. She had taken pictures from my carefully preserved family albums without asking. The same albums I'd been meaning to digitize myself for years, but hadn't had time to tackle properly. Now Jessica had swooped in and done it her way, probably missing important details about dates and people that only I would know to include. "How thoughtful of her," I said, my voice tight. As we approached the main gathering area, Jessica spotted us and practically bounced over, her blonde ponytail swinging behind her like she was still the college cheerleader she'd been when David first brought her home. She looked annoyingly fresh and put together in her sundress and sandals, while I felt overdressed in my carefully chosen blouse and slacks, the same outfit I'd worn to host every reunion for the past 5 years. "Eleanor! Finally!" Jessica exclaimed, reaching for my cake carrier before I could protest. "I was starting to worry something had happened to you. I hope you don't mind, but I went ahead and got everyone situated since people were arriving early and seemed a little confused about where to go. At our family reunion that had been held in the same pavilion with the same basic layout for over a decade. How considerate," I replied, not trusting myself to say more. "I hope you don't mind the little changes I made," Jessica continued, either missing or ignoring the ice in my voice. "I thought it would be fun to mix up the seating arrangements this year so people could meet relatives they don't usually talk to. And I moved the food table closer to the playground so the parents could keep an eye on the kids while they ate." Every single thing she described was a departure from the tried and true system I'd perfected over 15 years of hosting these gatherings. The seating arrangements were carefully planned to keep certain relatives apart, Uncle Frank and his ex-wife's new husband, for instance, and to make sure the elderly family members had easy access to restrooms and shade. The food table placement had been chosen specifically to avoid the chaos of children running around with sticky fingers near the buffet. But as I looked around, I had to admit that people seemed happy, relaxed even. My cousin Jenny, who usually sat quietly in the corner, was laughing loudly at something my nephew Tyler was telling her. The kids were indeed easier for parents to supervise from the new food table location. Even Grandma Rose, despite being moved from her usual spot, seemed to be enjoying an animated conversation with Jessica's mother, who had apparently been invited this year. Jessica's mother, at our family reunion. Another decision made without consulting me. "Well," I said finally, setting down my box of decorations with perhaps more force than necessary, "I suppose I should see what needs to be done." "Oh, don't worry about a thing," Jessica chirped. "I think we've got it all covered. Why don't you just relax and enjoy yourself for once? You always work so hard at these things." Relax, enjoy myself. At the event I had planned and organized and worried about for months. While my daughter-in-law played hostess and my own family members treated her like she'd hung the moon, I smiled tightly and nodded, but inside I was already formulating a plan. If Jessica wanted to play hostess, if she wanted to be the center of attention at my family reunion, then she was about to learn that there was only room for one leading lady in this family drama. And I had 15 years of experience and home field advantage. By 12:30, Jessica had somehow managed to get everyone seated, served, and laughing at her stories about David's childhood mishaps, stories that I had told her in confidence during private family dinners, now being broadcast to the entire reunion as if they were her own memories to share. I sat at what used to be the head table, now relegated to somewhere in the middle of Jessica's new democratic seating arrangement, picking at my potato salad and watching my family hang on her every word. "And then," Jessica was saying, gesturing dramatically with her fork, "little David decided he was going to help Eleanor with the Thanksgiving turkey by giving it a bath in the kitchen sink." The table erupted in laughter, and I felt my face burn. That story was from David's 7th Thanksgiving, when he genuinely thought he was being helpful. It was one of my treasured memories of his sweet, innocent attempt to contribute, and now Jessica was telling it like it was some adorable family legend she'd witnessed firsthand. "Oh my goodness, Eleanor," my sister-in-law Carol giggled. "You never told us that story." "Jessica, you're such a natural storyteller." I never told them that story, because it happened before most of them had joined the family. Jessica had collected it from me like a trophy and was now using it to establish herself as the keeper of our family's memories. I watched as she launched into another anecdote. This one about David's disastrous first attempt at driving, which had resulted in him backing into my prized rose garden. Again, something I had shared with her privately, now being served up for public consumption. "You know what we should do?" Jessica announced suddenly, standing up with the kind of theatrical flair that suggested this wasn't a spontaneous idea at all. "We should go around the table and have everyone share their favorite family memory. Wouldn't that be fun?" A chorus of agreement rose from the assembled relatives, and I felt my stomach drop. This was exactly the kind of forced bonding activity that I had deliberately avoided in all my years of organizing these reunions. Our family didn't need gimmicks. We had genuine relationships built over decades of shared experiences. "What a lovely idea," I said, my voice honey-sweet with false enthusiasm. "Though I wonder if we might want to stick to our usual schedule. I had planned some games for the children after lunch, and if we run too late, we'll miss the best light for the family photo." Jessica's smile never wavered, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "Oh, we have plenty of time, and I actually brought my professional camera today. I thought we could do something a little more artistic than the usual group shot. Maybe some candid shots of people sharing stories." Professional camera. Of course she had a professional camera. Jessica had taken exactly one photography class at the community center and now considered herself the family's official documentarian. Never mind that I had been carefully maintaining our family photo albums for years, ensuring that every reunion, birthday and holiday was properly recorded and preserved. How thoughtful, I managed, though I do hope you remembered to bring extra batteries. These outdoor events can be quite demanding on equipment. The barb was subtle, but Jessica caught it. Her smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. "Oh, I always come prepared." I actually brought backup batteries, extra memory cards, and even a portable charger. I learned from the best. David told me how you always plan for every contingency. Clever. She turned my criticism into a compliment while simultaneously establishing herself as my protege, but two could play at that game. "Speaking of planning," I said, rising from my seat with the cake server I'd brought, "I should probably get my chocolate cake ready for dessert. It needs to be cut in a very specific way to serve properly." I paused, letting my eyes sweep across the table. "It's the same recipe I've been perfecting for 23 years, since before David could even reach the kitchen counter." I had their attention now. The chocolate cake was legendary in our family, requested at every birthday and celebration. It was my signature dish, the one thing that everyone associated specifically with me. "Oh, that reminds me." Jessica jumped up, practically bouncing with excitement. "I brought dessert too. I made this amazing tiramisu. It's David's new favorite. I got the recipe from his Italian grandmother's cookbook." His Italian grandmother's cookbook, the one that had been passed down through 3 generations and was written entirely in faded Italian script. The one I had tried for years to translate and use with limited success. Jessica had somehow not only mastered it, but was now presenting herself as the inheritor of that particular family tradition. "How nice," I said, my voice dropping several degrees in temperature. "I'm sure it will be an interesting addition to our usual dessert selection." The word addition hung in the air like a challenge. This wasn't about dessert anymore, and everyone at the table seemed to sense it. The conversations around us gradually died down as family members became aware of the subtle tension crackling between Jessica and me. David, poor oblivious David, finally seemed to pick up on the undercurrents. "Mom, you know we always have room for more dessert at these things. Remember Uncle Pete's famous appetite?" Uncle Pete, as if summoned by the mention of his name, looked up from his second helping of corn salad. "Did someone say dessert? Eleanor, please tell me you brought that chocolate cake. I've been looking forward to it all year." A small victory. I smiled genuinely for the first time since arriving. "Of course, Uncle Pete. It's right here, just waiting to be served." "Actually," Jessica interjected, her voice bright, but with an edge I was beginning to recognize. "I thought it might be fun to have a little dessert competition. We could set up a tasting station and let everyone vote on their favorites. Make it interactive." The suggestion was met with enthusiastic approval from several of the younger family members, who were always up for anything that resembled a game or contest. But I could see exactly what Jessica was doing, turning my signature contribution into a competition where she could showcase her supposed mastery of family recipes. "What a creative idea," I said slowly, "though I'm not sure we want to put people in the position of having to choose favorites. These reunions are about bringing people together, not creating divisions." "Oh, I don't think anyone would take it seriously," Jessica laughed, but there was something calculating in her eyes. "It would just be for fun, unless," she tilted her head with mock concern, "unless you're worried about a little friendly competition." And there it was, the gauntlet, thrown down in front of my entire family. Jessica had just publicly questioned my confidence in my own signature dish, challenged my position as the family's established baker, and positioned herself as the brave newcomer willing to take on the matriarch. The table had gone completely quiet now. Even the children seemed to sense that something important was happening. I could feel every eye on me, waiting to see how I would respond to this very public challenge. I set down my cake server and looked directly at Jessica, letting a slow smile spread across my face. "You know what, dear? You're absolutely right. A little friendly competition never hurt anyone." The relief around the table was palpable, but Jessica's expression flickered with uncertainty. She had expected me to back down, to retreat into the role of gracious older woman who wouldn't engage in such petty games. Instead, I had accepted her challenge, and now she was going to discover exactly what 15 years of hosting experience could do when properly motivated. "Wonderful," she said, but I caught the slight tremor in her voice. "Should we set up the tasting station over by the gift table?" "Actually," I said, my voice taking on the authoritative tone I used when organizing family logistics, "if we're going to do this properly, we should probably make it part of the afternoon activities. Give people time to digest lunch, build up some anticipation." I paused, letting my experience show. I've found that timing is everything with these family events. Jessica nodded, but I could see her frantically trying to figure out what she'd gotten herself into. She had expected a simple dessert showdown. Instead, she was about to learn that challenging the person who had been successfully orchestrating family gatherings for over a decade was like bringing a knife to a gunfight. As the lunch conversations gradually resumed around us, I began mentally preparing for battle. Jessica wanted to steal the spotlight at my family reunion. She was about to discover that spotlights could burn as well as illuminate. By 2 o'clock, word of the great dessert showdown had spread throughout the reunion like wildfire. What had started as Jessica's impulsive challenge had morphed into the afternoon's main event, with various family members taking sides and offering to help set up what my cousin Danny had dubbed the Battle of the Sweets. I spent the hour after lunch strategically positioning myself around the pavilion, having quiet conversations with key family members. Not about the dessert competition, of course. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I simply reminded people of shared memories, asked about their lives, and generally reinforced the relationships I'd been carefully nurturing for decades. "Aunt Eleanor," my nephew Marcus said as I helped him chase down his escaped toddler, "I can't believe you've been organizing these reunions for 15 years. I was just telling my wife how much work it must be to coordinate everyone's schedules and preferences." "Oh, it's a labor of love," I replied, scooping up little Emma before she could toddle into the lake. Though I have to admit, it's gotten more complex over the years as the family has grown. So many dietary restrictions and preferences to remember, scheduling conflicts to work around, family dynamics to consider. I let the sentence trail off meaningfully. Marcus, who had witnessed more than his share of family drama over the years, nodded knowingly. "I bet. It's like being a diplomat and an event planner rolled into one. Exactly. I handed Emma back to him, making sure to ruffle her hair affectionately. Though I suppose that's what makes it worthwhile, knowing that everyone feels included and comfortable. Meanwhile, across the pavilion, I could see Jessica frantically setting up her tiramisu presentation. She'd apparently brought not just one dessert, but an entire Italian dessert buffet. Tiramisu, cannoli, and what looked like homemade gelato in a portable freezer unit. The display was impressive, I had to admit, but it also screamed trying too hard to anyone with eyes to see. My chocolate cake, by contrast, sat serenely on its vintage glass pedestal, the same one I'd used for every special occasion for the past 20 years. Simple, elegant, and radiating the quiet confidence of a dessert that had never failed to please. "Eleanor, dear," my mother-in-law approached, her voice carefully neutral. "Jessica seems very enthusiastic about this dessert idea." Gladys had always been diplomatic, but I could read the subtext. She was as uncomfortable with Jessica's takeover attempt as I was, but too polite to say so directly. "She certainly is," I agreed. "It's lovely to see someone so eager to contribute to family traditions." The emphasis on traditions wasn't lost on Gladys, who had been attending these reunions since before Jessica was born. She patted my arm gently. "Some traditions are worth preserving exactly as they are," she said quietly. At 2:30, Jessica called for everyone's attention by tapping a spoon against her water glass like she was making a wedding toast. The theatrical gesture made me cringe internally. This was a family picnic, not a formal dinner party. "Everyone! If I could have your attention for just a moment," she called out, her voice carrying that artificially bright tone that suggested she was more nervous than she wanted to appear. I thought it might be fun to kick off our dessert tasting with a little background on the treats we'll be sampling today. Our dessert tasting. We'll be sampling. She had completely appropriated the event, making herself the hostess of what was essentially a challenge to my position in the family hierarchy. "First," Jessica continued, gesturing toward her elaborate setup, "we have a traditional Italian dessert selection featuring recipes that have been in David's family for generations. I spent months learning to make authentic tiramisu from his great-grandmother's original recipe. And I even imported mascarpone cheese from Italy to make sure the flavor was perfect." A murmur of impressed appreciation rippled through the crowd. I had to hand it to her. She'd done her homework. The story about importing ingredients was probably exaggerated, but it sounded impressive. "And over here," she continued, turning toward my simple but elegant cake display, "we have Eleanor's famous chocolate cake, which I know many of you have been enjoying for years." The way she said it made my cake sound like the consolation prize, the familiar, reliable option compared to her exotic, authentic offerings. But I'd been playing this game longer than she'd been alive, and I knew exactly how to handle this moment. I stepped forward with a warm smile, my voice carrying the natural authority of someone who didn't need to fight for attention. "Thank you, Jessica. You know, it's interesting that you mentioned family recipes, because this chocolate cake actually has quite a story of its own." I paused, letting curiosity build naturally rather than demanding attention like Jessica had. 23 years ago, when David was just a baby, I was desperate to find the perfect cake recipe for his first birthday. I must have tried dozens of different recipes, but nothing seemed quite right. Too sweet, too dry, too complicated for a busy new mother. I could see people leaning in slightly, drawn by the personal nature of the story. This wasn't a performance, it was a genuine memory, and the difference was palpable. Finally, David's great-aunt Ruth, many of you remember Aunt Ruth, took pity on me and shared her secret recipe. But here's the thing, it wasn't written down anywhere. It had been passed down orally through 3 generations of family bakers, and Aunt Ruth was the only one left who remembered it. Now I had their complete attention. Even Jessica was listening, though I could see her trying to figure out where this was going. She spent an entire afternoon in my kitchen, teaching me not just the ingredients, but the techniques. How to tell when the batter was exactly the right consistency, how to know when the cake was perfectly done without relying on timers, how to make the frosting that would complement rather than overpower the chocolate. Dean, I moved to stand beside my cake, placing one hand gently on the pedestal. That recipe died with Aunt Ruth 5 years ago. This cake represents the last living link to a tradition that goes back to David's great-great-grandmother, who brought it with her when she immigrated from Germany in 1892. The silence that followed was profound. I had just reframed the entire competition, transforming my simple chocolate cake from the predictable option into a precious family heirloom, the last repository of a lost tradition. I've been making this cake for David's birthday every year since he turned 1, I continued, my voice soft but carrying easily in the hushed pavilion. It's been served at every major family celebration, every reunion, every milestone moment. It's not just a dessert, it's our family's history, one slice at a time. When I looked up, I saw tears in several people's eyes. My sister Margaret was dabbing at her cheeks with a napkin, and even Uncle Pete looked unusually emotional. David himself seemed stunned. I could tell he'd never heard the full story of how the cake recipe had come to be part of our family traditions. Jessica, to her credit, recovered quickly. That's such a beautiful story, Eleanor. It really shows how food connects us to our heritage. But I could hear the uncertainty in her voice now. She'd expected to compete against a simple chocolate cake. Instead, she was up against generations of family history and emotional connection. Well, I said, my smile genuine now rather than strategic. I suppose we should let everyone taste both offerings and make their own decisions. After all, the best family traditions are the ones that speak to people's hearts as well as their taste buds. As people began lining up for the tasting, I noticed something interesting. The energy in the crowd had shifted. What had started as a light-hearted competition now felt more like a celebration of family heritage. People were sharing their own stories about special family recipes and food memories as they waited in line. Jessica had wanted to steal the spotlight, but instead she'd inadvertently created the perfect opportunity for me to shine brighter than ever. Sometimes the best way to win a battle is to change the rules of engagement entirely. But as I watched her face while people tasted the desserts, I realized that this victory might come at a cost I hadn't fully considered. Jessica wasn't just some opportunistic outsider trying to take over. She was David's wife, a member of our family, whether I liked it or not, and I was about to very publicly demonstrate that challenging me was a mistake she wouldn't want to make again. The question was, would winning this battle ultimately cost me the war for my son's happiness? The results of the dessert tasting were as decisive as they were predictable. While Jessica's Italian dessert spread was certainly impressive and received its share of compliments, my chocolate cake swept through the family like a wave of nostalgia and comfort. Person after person came up to me with memories triggered by that first bite, stories of birthdays, anniversaries, celebrations where this exact cake had been the centerpiece. Eleanor, this tastes exactly like the cake you made for my wedding shower 12 years ago, my niece Sarah said, tears actually streaming down her cheeks. I can't believe you've kept the recipe exactly the same all these years. Mom, I had no idea about Great Aunt Ruth. David approached with his own slice, looking somewhat shell-shocked. Why didn't you ever tell me that story before? I could see Jessica hovering nearby, her smile becoming more strained by the minute as the praise for my cake continued to pour in while her elaborate Italian spread received polite but lukewarm responses. Several people had mentioned that the tiramisu was interesting and very authentic, but I'd been organizing family events long enough to know that interesting was not the same as beloved. Well, Jessica announced with forced cheerfulness as the tasting wound down, I think we can all agree that Eleanor's cake is definitely the family favorite. I'm just honored to have been part of such a sweet family tradition. It was a gracious concession, and I should have accepted it with equal grace. I should have praised her effort, complimented her ambition, and moved on to the next reunion activity. Instead, some vindictive part of me, the part that had been simmering with resentment all day, decided to twist the knife just a little deeper. "Thank you, dear," I said, my voice carrying just enough condescension to sting. "Of course, family favorites aren't really something you can compete with. They're earned over decades of service and love. But I'm sure you'll develop your own specialties as you settle into the family." The words hung in the air like a slap. I watched Jessica's face crumble for just a moment before she recovered her composure, but the damage was done. Around us, conversations gradually died as people realized what had just happened. "As you settle into the family." I had just publicly reminded everyone, including Jessica, that she was still the newcomer here, still on probation, still earning her place among us. After 3 years of marriage to my son, I had just relegated her to the status of an outsider trying to fit in. David's face went through a complex series of emotions: confusion, embarrassment, and finally, anger. "Mom," he said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. That was uncalled for. Before I could respond, Jessica placed a gentle hand on his arm. "It's okay, David. Your mother is absolutely right. I am still learning how to be part of this wonderful family, and I clearly have a lot to learn about family traditions and what makes them special." Her response was so mature, so gracious, that it made my petty comment look even worse by comparison. She had turned the other cheek, and in doing so had made me look like exactly what I was in that moment, a bitter older woman threatened by a younger one's enthusiasm. "I think," Jessica continued, her voice steady despite the obvious hurt in her eyes, "that I might have gotten a little carried away today. I was so excited to contribute that I forgot this isn't really my event to host." Now she chose to be humble and self-aware. After spending the entire day reorganizing my reunion, greeting my family members, and challenging my signature dessert, the timing of her gracious retreat felt almost calculated, designed to make me look like the villain in this family drama. But as I looked around at the faces of my relatives, my sister Margaret's disapproving frown, Uncle Pete's obvious discomfort, even Grandma Rose's shaking head, I realized that Jessica didn't need to calculate anything. My own behavior had already cast me as the villain quite effectively. "Perhaps," I said, trying to salvage some dignity from the situation, "we should move on to the afternoon activities I planned." "Actually, Mom," David said, his voice still tight with controlled anger, "I think Jessica and I are going to head home early. She's not feeling well." It was obviously a lie. Jessica looked perfectly fine physically, though emotionally she appeared to be holding herself together through sheer force of will. But it was also clearly David's way of removing his wife from a situation where I had deliberately made her uncomfortable. "Oh, but we haven't taken the family photo yet," I protested, suddenly panicking at the thought of them leaving. "And I had games planned for the children and the annual family trivia contest." "I'm sure you can handle all of that just fine," David replied coolly. "You've been doing it successfully for 15 years after all." The echo of my own earlier words stung. I'd spent the day emphasizing my experience and expertise, claiming ownership of family traditions and events. And now, David was throwing that expertise back at me as a reason why they weren't needed. As they gathered their things and said their polite goodbyes to other family members, I found myself standing alone by the dessert table, surrounded by the remnants of my Pyrrhic victory. Yes, everyone had preferred my chocolate cake. Yes, I had successfully defended my position as the family matriarch and primary hostess, but I had also alienated my son and humiliated his wife in front of our entire extended family. "Eleanor," my sister Margaret approached, her voice gentle but firm. "We need to talk." "Guys," I followed her to a quiet corner of the pavilion, where she turned to face me with the expression I remembered from our childhood, the one she used when she was about to tell me an uncomfortable truth, whether I wanted to hear it or not. "What you did to that girl was cruel," she said without preamble, "and unnecessary. Margaret, you don't understand. I understand perfectly." Jessica came in here today with enthusiasm and energy, trying to contribute to our family gathering, and you turned it into a territorial battle that she never had a chance of winning. I started to protest, but Margaret held up a hand. Yes, she overstepped a bit with the hosting duties. Yes, she probably should have checked with you before rearranging things. But Eleanor, she's been part of this family for 3 years, and you're still treating her like an interloper. She took over my reunion. She tried to help with your reunion. There's a difference, and deep down, you know it. Margaret's voice softened slightly. Honey, I know this is hard. I know you've been the center of this family for so long that sharing that role feels threatening. But Jessica isn't trying to replace you. She's trying to find her place alongside you. The truth of Margaret's words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on protecting my position, my traditions, my role as family organizer, that I had completely missed Jessica's actual motivation. She hadn't been trying to steal my spotlight. She'd been trying to earn her place in it. But she changed everything, I said weakly. The seating arrangements, the photo display, the whole flow of the event. And was any of it actually bad? Margaret asked pointedly. I saw people mixing and talking who usually stick to their usual corners. The kids were happier with the new food table location. Even Mom seemed to enjoy her conversation with Jessica's mother. I couldn't argue with any of that. The reunion had actually run quite smoothly under Jessica's modifications, perhaps even better than some of my more rigidly organized events. The point is, Margaret continued, Jessica was trying to improve something she cares about, our family gatherings. She wasn't trying to diminish your contributions. She was trying to build on them. And instead of recognizing that and working with her, you turned it into a competition that you were guaranteed to win. As the afternoon wore on, and I mechanically went through the motions of hosting the remaining activities, Margaret's words echoed in my mind. The family trivia contest fell flat without David's competitive spirit and Jessica's enthusiastic participation. The children's games felt perfunctory rather than joyful. Even the traditional family photo seemed diminished by the obvious absence of 2 key family members. By 5 o'clock, as people began packing up their coolers and folding their chairs, I realized that my great victory had come at a terrible cost. I had successfully defended my territory, maintained my position as family matriarch, and proven that my chocolate cake was indeed the beloved family favorite. But I had also driven away my son and his wife, created an uncomfortable atmosphere that everyone would remember long after they forgot about the dessert competition, and revealed myself to be the kind of person who would publicly humiliate a family member to protect my own ego. As I loaded my largely untouched 3-layer chocolate cake back into my car, I couldn't help but wonder, what exactly had I won, and was it worth what I'd lost? The drive home was silent except for the air conditioning and my own thoughts, but I knew that the real reckoning was still to come. David would call, or maybe he wouldn't. Jessica would try to smooth things over, or maybe she'd finally give up trying. Either way, I had a decision to make about what kind of person I wanted to be, and what kind of family I wanted us to remain. The spotlight I had fought so hard to keep was beginning to feel very cold and lonely indeed. 3 days passed without a word from David. 3 long days of me replaying the reunion over and over in my mind, each time seeing my behavior more clearly and liking what I saw less and less. I'd called twice and gotten voicemail both times. Polite, distant voicemail messages that didn't invite conversation or reconciliation. On Thursday morning, I finally swallowed my pride and drove to their house. Jessica answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked tired, and there were dark circles under her eyes that made me wonder if she'd been sleeping as poorly as I had been. Eleanor, she said, her voice carefully neutral. David's at work. Actually, I came to see you, I said, holding up the covered dish I'd brought. I made your favorite blueberry scones. May I come in? She hesitated for a moment, and I could see her weighing her options. Finally, she stepped aside and gestured me into the living room, the same living room where I'd shared so many family stories with her over the years, stories she'd then retold at the reunion as if they were her own memories. But sitting there in the morning light, looking at the framed photos of David and Jessica's wedding, their honeymoon in Italy, their first Christmas together, I began to see those shared stories differently. Maybe Jessica hadn't been stealing my memories. Maybe she'd been trying to weave herself into the fabric of our family history to find her place in the narrative that had been unfolding for decades before she arrived. "Jessica," I began, then stopped. I'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times on the drive over, but now that I was here, all my carefully planned words seemed inadequate. "I owe you an apology." She looked up from where she'd been staring at her hands, surprise flickering across her face. "A big one," I continued. "What I did at the reunion was inexcusable. I was cruel and petty, and I made you feel unwelcome in your own family. I'm deeply sorry." Jessica was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her processing my words. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "Can I ask you something, Eleanor? What did I do wrong? I've been going over that day in my mind, trying to figure out where I went so far off track, and I honestly don't understand what made you so angry with me." The question was so earnest, so genuinely confused, that it made my chest tight with shame. She really didn't understand. In her mind, she'd been trying to help, trying to contribute, trying to be a good daughter-in-law and family member. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said quietly. "That's what makes my behavior so terrible. You were enthusiastic and helpful and trying to make the reunion special. I was threatened by that enthusiasm because..." I paused, forcing myself to be honest. "Because I was afraid of losing my place in the family." Jessica's eyebrows rose. "Losing your place? Eleanor, you're David's mother. You're the heart of this family. How could you possibly lose your place?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I've been organizing these reunions for 15 years. I've been the one everyone calls when they need family contact information, or when they want to know the history behind family traditions, or when they need someone to coordinate holiday schedules. It's been my role, my identity. And then you came in with your energy and your ideas and your professional camera, and suddenly I felt replaceable." Jessica leaned forward, her expression softening. "Eleanor, I wasn't trying to replace you. I was trying to learn from you. Do you know how intimidating it is to marry into a family that has such strong traditions and connections? I felt like I was constantly trying to prove that I belonged, that I could contribute something meaningful. By taking over the reunion? By trying to help make it special," she corrected gently. "I thought if I could show you that I understood how important family was, that I could help make these gatherings even better, then maybe I'd finally feel like I really belonged here." I sat back in my chair, feeling the full weight of how badly I'd misunderstood the situation. "So, when you greeted everyone at the entrance..." "I was trying to make sure everyone felt welcomed and included, the way you always do. When you organize these events, you remember everyone's names, their dietary restrictions, their family situations. I was trying to learn how to do that too, and the seating arrangements. I thought it would be fun to help people make new connections. I've watched you worry about family members who seem isolated at these gatherings, and I wanted to help solve that problem." Each explanation felt like a small dagger to my heart. Jessica hadn't been trying to usurp my role. She'd been trying to apprentice herself to it. She'd been watching me, learning from me, trying to become the kind of family member I'd always been. "And the dessert competition?" I asked, though I was almost afraid to hear the answer. Jessica's cheeks flushed pink. I panicked. "I could tell you were upset with me, and I thought if I could show you that I respected your traditions while also sharing something from David's Italian heritage, maybe we could find some middle ground. But then you told that beautiful story about Aunt Ruth and the recipe, and I realized I'd turned something precious into a contest." She was quiet for a moment, then added, "I spent 3 hours crying after we got home. Not because I lost some silly dessert competition, but because I realized I'd made you feel like I was trying to take something away from you when all I wanted was to give something back. The tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over. Oh, Jessica, I'm so sorry. I was so focused on protecting what I thought was mine that I completely missed what you were trying to do. I should have talked to you first, she said, pulling a tissue from the box on the coffee table and handing it to me. I should have asked before I changed the seating arrangements or set up the photo display. I got so excited about contributing that I forgot basic courtesy. You shouldn't have to ask permission to help your own family, I said firmly. This is your family too, Jessica. It has been for 3 years, and I'm ashamed that I made you feel otherwise. We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us processing the conversation. Finally, Jessica spoke again. Eleanor, can I tell you something? That chocolate cake story you told at the reunion, it was beautiful, and it made me realize something important about family traditions. I looked up at her, curious. I was so focused on trying to prove I could make authentic Italian desserts that I forgot the most important ingredient, the love and history that makes food special to a family. Your cake isn't just delicious, it's a connection to people who are gone, a way of keeping their memory alive. That's what makes it irreplaceable. But your tiramisu was made with love too, I pointed out. You spent months learning to make it properly, imported special ingredients, tried to honor David's heritage. That shows tremendous care and dedication. Maybe, Jessica said with a small smile, but I think I was trying to create instant tradition instead of letting it develop naturally. I wanted to fast-track my way to belonging instead of understanding that belonging takes time. I reached over and took her hand. Jessica, you've belonged to this family since the day David brought you home, and you helped me wash dishes after dinner without being asked. The belonging was never in question. It was my fear that was the problem. So where do we go from here? She asked. I squeezed her hand. We start over. We plan next year's reunion together, combining your fresh ideas with the traditions that have worked well. We figure out how to make room for both of us in the family spotlight. I'd like that, Jessica said, her first genuine smile since I'd arrived. Though I have to admit, I'm terrified of planning an event with you. You're incredibly organized and experienced, and I'm just enthusiastic. Enthusiasm is exactly what our family gatherings need more of, I said. I've been so focused on maintaining traditions that I forgot they're supposed to evolve and grow as the family does. And I've been so focused on proving myself that I forgot to appreciate the foundation that was already there, Jessica replied. We spent the next hour talking about the reunion, what had worked well, what could be improved, how we might blend our different approaches. Jessica showed me the digital photo presentation she'd created, and I was amazed by the care she'd taken to research dates and identify people in the older photos. She'd even found pictures I'd forgotten I had, organizing them in a way that told the story of our family's growth over the years. This is incredible work, I told her honestly. I've been meaning to digitize these photos for years, but I never knew where to start. I could teach you, she offered, and maybe next year we could create something together. Your historical knowledge combined with my technical skills. I'd love that. When David came home that evening, he found us in the kitchen, planning a menu that incorporated both traditional family favorites and new dishes Jessica wanted to try. We were laughing about something, I can't even remember what, when he walked in. "Mom," he said, clearly surprised to find me there. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," Jessica said, standing up to give him a hug. "Your mother and I had a long talk, and we're planning next year's reunion together." David looked back and forth between us, his expression cautious. "Really? Because when I left for work this morning, you were pretty upset about my own behavior," I interrupted. "David, I owe you an apology too. I was threatened by Jessica's enthusiasm and took it out on both of you. That was wrong of me." "Mom," David said slowly, "I've never seen you act like that before. It scared me." His honesty stung, but I knew I deserved it. It scared me too. The thought of losing my place in the family, of becoming irrelevant, made me behave in ways that were completely unlike myself. "You could never be irrelevant," David said firmly. "You're the reason we have these family traditions in the first place. You're the one who taught me the importance of staying connected to our relatives." Jessica wasn't trying to replace that. She was trying to learn from it. "I know that now," I said, "and I'm going to spend the next year proving that I can be as generous with family leadership as I've always been with family love." David looked at Jessica, who nodded encouragingly. "So we're okay? All of us?" "We're better than okay," Jessica said. "We're going to be the dream team of family event planning." "God help us all," David said with a grin, but he was smiling as he said it. Over the following months, Jessica and I developed a partnership that surprised everyone, including ourselves. She handled the digital aspects of reunion planning, creating online RSVPs, managing the family photo archive, coordinating travel arrangements through a shared calendar system. I focused on the logistics I'd always managed: menu planning, venue coordination, managing family dynamics, and dietary restrictions. But more than that, we learned to appreciate each other's strengths. Jessica's enthusiasm and fresh perspective brought new energy to family gatherings, while my experience and deep knowledge of family history provided stability and continuity. Together, we created events that honored the past while embracing the future. The next year's reunion was our first official collaboration, and it was magical. Jessica's idea to create family story stations where different relatives shared memories and anecdotes worked beautifully with my traditional activities. Her digital photo displays complemented my carefully curated memorabilia. Most importantly, we both shared hosting duties naturally, each taking the lead on activities that played to our strengths. And yes, we had a dessert table that featured both my traditional chocolate cake and Jessica's Italian specialties, but this time it was a celebration of our family's diverse heritage rather than a competition for dominance. As I watched Jessica laugh with my sister Margaret while helping Uncle Pete to another slice of tiramisu, I realized that the spotlight I'd been so desperate to protect was actually big enough for both of us. In fact, it was brighter and warmer when shared. The lesson I learned that day at the reunion was one I should have understood years earlier. Family isn't about maintaining rigid hierarchies or protecting territory. It's about making room for everyone to contribute their gifts, whether those gifts come from years of experience or from the fresh enthusiasm of someone who's still learning where they fit. Jessica didn't steal my spotlight at the family reunion. She helped me realize that there was room for both of us to shine, and that our family was stronger when we worked together rather than competing for position. The real victory wasn't in proving who was the better hostess or baker. It was in learning that the best family traditions are the ones that grow and evolve to embrace everyone who wants to be part of them. And sometimes, the person who challenges you the most is the one who helps you become the person you were meant to be all along.